Hello and welcome to Blockchain Gaming World, episode 187. I'm your host, John Jordan. Don't forget to check out my daily email about blockchain gaming. You can find that at gamestx.substack.com. In today's episode, I'm talking to Aron Schmidt, who is the CEO of Laguna Labs. I first spoke to Aron on episode 132. That was in June 2023. And then we were talking about what was going on with their first game, which was Crypto Unicorns. So we do continue a little bit about what happened to Crypto Unicorns. I think it's fair to say the game wasn't the success they hoped it was going to be. And actually the studio downsized quite drastically in 2024. But they've handed over Crypto Unicorns to a community DAO, so they will sort of deal with the progress of that game, while Laguna Labs is refocusing on a new game called Neo Olympus. So lots of interesting stuff going on in that game. Clearly, on a high level, all the sort of learnings that they experienced through Crypto Unicorns have been sort of packaged into this new game. It's a fully on-chain game running on the B3 blockchain. Some very interesting technical stuff in terms of how it's dealing with NFTs and tokens and fractionalization, and sort of building that into a sort of interesting sort of RPG type sort of hardcore mechanic, while still being accessible for players. So I hope you enjoy the conversation. I certainly did. Looking forward to what happens with Neo Olympus. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel. So every episode we're putting out some pretty interesting interviews. Already got a whole bunch signed up for 2025. So don't miss out. Do subscribe. And we'll see you next time. Hello everyone, and welcome to the show. Very pleased I have Aron from Laguna Labs back on. I was just looking, you about 18 months ago, you were first on. So good to have you back, Aron. How's it going?
Fantastic. Happy to be here at the end of 2024.
Yeah, good. So we won't go through your sort of backstory because that's in the we've done that sort of already. But we will go through. We are going to talk mainly about the new project you sort of announced, Neo Olympus. And there's lots of interesting and cool stuff which I don't fully understand that you could explain to me. But we will start off with Crypto Unicorns. So when you first came on the show, Crypto Unicorns was what you were talking about, and back then you were going through sort of Web 2 expansion phase. But sort of you now call sort of Crypto Unicorns your first economic experiment. That's how you put it on the website. So do you want to just sort of walk us through sort of what happened to Crypto Unicorns, where it is now, and the sort of the thinking? Because I guess the thinking around some of those experiences, both good and bad, in Crypto Unicorns, has sort of led you. I assume they've led you to Neo Olympus. So that'd be a good sort of kicking off point.
For sure. Yeah, it'd be impossible in a 30-minute or so podcast to really go through everything that kind of went wrong and went right with Crypto Unicorns. I mean, ultimately, we failed to inflect growth. We worked for many, many years on it, and even with the Xi migration, like we just could not see that project inflect growth. I think a major lesson that I learned, a very humbling lesson, is like once you let these token economies out of the bag, it is impossible to stuff them back in. And I mean, you were there at the beginning. I remember the frustration you had around some of the problems and stuff that we had around launch. I mean, the combination of a rough launch with 6 weekly red candles to the cycle bottom, ETH at $800, crypto is dead, crypto is dying. Like that kind of combination of things really set us off on the wrong foot after 9 months of kind of can't miss success, right? And so I really feel like we struggled to recover momentum after that moment. And I think that's something that's really been embedded in the small team that remains now, is we have to set the dominoes up with Neo Olympus and make sure each one falls into the next one. Otherwise the sequence is broke, the hype is gone, and it's over. So obviously it's been a rough year for all things Crypto Unicorns. We had the kind of zigration occur and not lead to growth. Then we had a very brutal kind of bear market summer that just ended in a point where the treasury no longer had the funds to continue to support the Laguna Games team. So we went through a massive layoff, which Laguna Labs is effectively born out of. We went from over 90 people to 10. And, I guess the positive, the bright side of this is that the DAO still exists. The DAO still has nearly 1 million in ETH in it. The DAO is actually completely community controlled now. I have zero influence over it. And Laguna Labs is simply there to, hand it off to the person that ultimately steps up to take control. So they're in the middle right now of electing the new governance council. It'll be the most important governance council in the history of the project. And, it's been really promising to see not only, community members remain, but actually work to find a path forward. And so there's several groups kind of competing. One group kind of wants to reboot some form of the game. One group wants to kind of pull a Pudgy Penguins and go very NFT IP focused. And another group's kind of a hybrid between the two. So that's probably, again, it's a terrible situation. I'll always accept all the blame for the failure of the project, right? I accept both the success and the failure of that. But I am optimistic about a path forward, and there's certainly enough interest and attention and capital to see something happen. And the last thing I'll say on it is nothing would make me happier than to have the community actually succeed where I failed. And very few projects, have the infrastructure set up to even do what we did, right? The DAO legitimately owns the IP. Laguna does not. Right. I actually convinced my investors to sign over the IP we created, right? To a DAO, to these token holders. And so, anyway, I hope with time, and I think we're already seeing this as people kind of come out of the ashes of what happened. We're seeing people go, they kind of did actually leave us in a position where we could carry forward. And, I think most projects in the space are not set up that way.
No. I mean, I guess that's the sort of interesting sort of arc of the project. As you say, it was sort of interesting that your timing when you launched was sort of the absolute height of sort of NFT craze and bull market, and you were on Polygon for the first big games, all that sort of stuff. You were sort of perfectly timed for that, but then obviously that you sort of perfectly timed for all the other sort of stuff that came under, and I guess we've seen very you have to have a very big sort of you have to be like an Axie size sort of success to sort of be able to sort of transition through some of those sort of problems. And I guess it is interesting that you gave it a good crack of the whip. You tried, you built a lot of stuff, as you say. You built a lot of tech. Probably some of that tech was probably a bit ahead of its time to some degree. But there was a lot of attempts to engage with different types of communities. So you didn't fail for sort of lack of trying. And the community, they could, as you say, you've handed it all over to them, which doesn't happen in games. So that's a sort of a plus for blockchain games. It's sort of, guys, you got $1 million of ETH, which probably the price is going up of that, so that's nice. What can you do with it? You either committed 100 or whoever, 50 people who really want to go for it. So that's I think we've seen. We've not seen many blockchain games sort of succeed and just walk off into the sunset. They all go through their curves, and most of them hit a brick wall and never seen of again. So I think that's quite a positive outcome. I mean, obviously not positive, but relative to the space, I think it's sort of quite positive.
It could be completely dead, and it's not. Again, I'm not certainly trying to obfuscate the failures that led to the situation, right? But it is a bright spot. It is a differentiator. The vast majority of projects are not set up this way, and thus when the company fails, the project will go away, right? And so, and it's so much of these very hard lessons learned, right, are informing the design of Neo Olympus. And so, that's how we're choosing to kind of move forward, right? Is to really look at what went wrong and how will we, directly apply those learnings to the next project. Okay. So trying to make the most out of certainly a bad situation. And I'm excited to kind of see where it goes. Both the CU DAO and obviously our new project, Neo Olympus.
Okay, so let's leave crypto unicorns behind now and move on. So, what did the spark come about? Just in terms of the kind of concept, we're going to some of the sort of more technical stuff, but just in terms of the concept of a second game. How does it come about?
Gods of Olympus, which was the original working title for Neo Olympus, has been a project that we've had at Laguna Games since we started in 2020. So before even the crypto pivot. And it's had a bunch of different iterations and names. Kingdoms Forever was actually the publishing deal that we closed with WB, and that was kind of the predecessor, the spiritual predecessor to what Gods of Olympus would be. And the ultimate irony is when I raised the seed fund, I actually had a pitch deck for Gods of Olympus and not one for crypto unicorns. And so the kind of ultimate irony of all of that is a lot of our seed investors bet on kind of us being a multi-project team from the beginning, right? And so The cool light bulb moment, though, was the shift in the IP, because originally it was very like kind of generic Greek heroes as you would think and envision them to be, and the pivot to the heroes being mecha, the gods being mecha or mechs, and the titans being kaiju, and them kind of controlling monsters, and that spin on Greek fiction and Greek mythology was a real kind of light bulb moment in the creative process. And so, massive shout out to Bo, who was the art director for CU. He's obviously the art creative director for Neo Olympus, has just blown it out of the water, as hopefully people start to see in our Twitter and in the light paper. I don't know. It's just a really cool spin on an IP that people know. Like, people have heard of Hercules, people have heard of Artemis, people have heard of Zeus, right? But haven't seen what a Zeus mech would look like, what a Hercules mech would look like. And they look awesome, is the TLDR on that front. So very passionate about that kind of shift to this futuristic Olympian kind of mythology vision.
Okay, cool. But it is, as Crypto Unicorns is a fully on-chain game, so clearly you think that's the sort of sweet spot for blockchain?
Absolutely. I mean, Crypto Unicorns, to be clear, was very on-chain, but still had a server, right, for all the gameplay and, even the breeding operations and things of that nature. And a major lesson learned is like how hard it is to build a successful hybrid gaming experience. And it's funny. I did make fun of the fully on-chain games people for a while, kind of just from the perspective of thinking they were a little too philosophical with this autonomous worlds language and stuff. And our approach is much more like having live operated a kind of Web 2.5 game for 3 years and the struggles of that. I believe you can only be successful in the space building on fully on-chain now.
Oh, really?
I just think if you're going to be a crypto native game and have assets and things, you benefit from the trustless, transparent nature of it being fully on chain, right? You benefit from the fact that, like, put it to you this way, John, Crypto Unicorns would still be around today if it was fully on chain.
Oh, really?
There would have been no AWS server build to keep going, right? There would be no server infrastructure team to support, right? Again, it would continue operating so long as the blockchain it's on operates, right? And so from that principle alone, fully on-chain is the only way to build. If you're going to make a commitment to building a long-term, sustainable economic network, it has to be fully on-chain.
Okay. And then another sort of interesting part of that, in terms of the way you're doing it, is you're going with B3, which is a fairly new blockchain based on Base. It's some of the Base team, I believe. So obviously there are more blockchains out there at the moment than you can shake a stick at. So
yes,
how did you end up with those guys? Because they are fairly new. I don't know. I think them is the mainnet live. You'll tell us, but there's not. Some games have announced for it, but I don't think there's anything very live on it at the moment. So obviously a bit of a risk around that, maybe.
Yeah, Daryl and I have worked together before. He was on the Coinbase wallet team, and we did one of the first promos way back in the day with Crypto Unicorns. So Daryl and I had kind of kept up through the years, and when he spun out of the Coinbase team and started building B3, I went and wanted to talk to him about what he was building. The thing that resonated with me that I think sets them apart is they're trying to build an ecosystem of game chains. They've accepted the idea that you want your game chain to be extremely fast and cheap. You do not want the noisy neighbor problem of, some new contract mint occurs and all of a sudden your game transactions have gotten more expensive. You want interoperability. Like, game devs do not want to be siloed to a specific chain. They simply want access to players and liquidity across the EVM. So Daryl's kind of freaking everybody out because he's so open to us being fully interoperable with other chains. Like, players will be able to, without bridging, play Neo Olympus from Arbitrum, from Abstract, and from Ronin when it goes permissionless next year. And so Daryl is not rejecting that. He's embracing that. And I really personally kind of see that as the future, particularly for games. Especially if you're going to be fully on chain, you need a very fast and cheap chain. And in fact, we're building on Arbitrum Orbit tech because that's the fastest, cheapest chain, you can run right now. So Parallel has also announced they're building a game chain in the B3 ecosystem. And the secret kind of sauce, or not so secret sauce, is they're using Sigma, which is an interoperability protocol that allows for very seamless cross-chain messaging. And so players who potentially are playing parallel are going to be able to play Neo Olympus without bridging to our chain. Bridge friction is terrible and it's a killer. And so avoiding that entirely via this interop layer is a very smart move. Another example is like most of our NFTs will get minted on base itself, right? Yeah. Because there's more liquidity there, right? And obviously you've got a big OpenSea deployment there. And you don't have to bridge the NFTs to our game chain to play. You'll simply play the game, and as you mint new NFTs, they're on base ready for you to trade. And so the RPC swapping madness, bridging crap is gone. So the crux of what got me really excited was the ecosystem, the legitimate ecosystem of game chains that they're trying to build, combined with that interop tech from Sigma. It just got me excited because that's the kind of, it aligns very closely with how I see the space going and my vision for it as well. So super pumped to be partnered with them. You're right. It is early, but if you're going to bet on a team coming directly out of Coinbase with the support that they have, obviously Pantera led a massive round into them to kickstart them. They're well-funded, very dedicated to where the space is headed, and exciting partnership to land for sure.
I guess it's always been one of those interesting things at my non-technical level. Even when I got in the scene in sort of 2018, there was all this sort of talk about the chains won't matter in the long term; it will be interoperable, or maybe people were there back then talking about Cosmos and Polkadot, and we're still sort of quite a way off that. We've actually sort of become more fragmented, where I'm sort of bridging between Base and Arbitrum and all this sort of Ethereum everywhere across these chains. So it's interesting that you think it's going to be a little bit closer than maybe I would have thought, starting to get this sort of like, it doesn't matter. I suppose we have it a little bit with some sort of tokens, ERC20 tokens on various chains, and
it's just becoming more common. And the experience is getting better. Really, it's being driven by the intense kind of cross-chain intense EIP, and I forget the number, the specific number behind it. But if you used a cross protocol, that's a very good example of like what that experience should be like in terms of bridging between chains and things of that nature. But I mean, we've already tested it. It's amazing in that if you're sitting on Arbitrum, you don't have to swap RPCs. You play the game like it's on Arbitrum because the interop layer has effectively a router contract. And the beauty for the chains is actually TBL doesn't necessarily leak because it stays on the chain, and the players, the users, don't necessarily leak over, right? Because they're just interacting as they normally would on Arbitrum. And so, the Ethereum community is, I think, very focused on solving the interop challenge, and I believe we're getting closer to that with technologies like Sigma. So it is, the pendulum's kind of swinging back towards it, I think, in the space.
And I guess having sort of read briefly some of the stuff around this, there's another tech we will talk about, and you'll explain it obviously a lot better than me. So there is a standard. I think it's actually the ERC 404 is actually the token standard, which allows you to do ERC 20 and ERC 721s within the same smart contract. But then there's another sort of version of that called DN 404, which is a more gas efficient way of doing that, which is all sort of techie and boring. But there is a cool thing. There's a reason that you're sort of highlighting this in the game, isn't it? So you call it sort of using the having NFTs, but using sort of the power of meme coins in terms of sort of raising audience. So you explain it properly, following my garbled sort of lead in.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll try my best. DN 404s are meme coins meets NFTs. Is a good way of thinking about it, right? So in simple terms, and prime cores for Neo Olympus are a DN404 collection, and that's what is minting in January. So with prime cores as reference, if you have one fungible token in your wallet, we automatically drop an NFT into your wallet, and that represents the prime core itself, which you can use to activate a Realm Forge, and you can have up to 7 prime cores per Realm Forge. So the cool thing about DN404 is it allows native fractionalization, because you could hold 0.5 of a prime core token. You won't have the NFT, right? It'll be kind of chilling in the DEX pool technically. But if you get to 1 or 2 or 3 whole numbers of these prime cores, you have the mirrored NFT in your wallet. And if you choose to transfer one prime core fungible token to another wallet, that NFT follows it. It kind of gets mirrored. Okay. The really cool thing that this enables is a reroll feature. So by basically selling a chunk of your prime core fungible token to the DEX and then buying it back, you create a reroll. Now you have to sell a certain amount. There's several requirements around that. We're going to make it super easy, one click on the website to do it. But it allows you to re-roll the metadata and traits of your prime core, which allows you to try to achieve a higher tier prime core over time, right? And it just creates a very cool system of re-rolling to try to optimize the collection of prime cores you have to like maximize your elemental resource generation and synergy bonuses in the Realm Forge. And so you're going to hear this a lot from me and certainly in a lot of our marketing material. We're really trying to gamify the experience of NFT collection, right? I think we saw with the first generation and some of early games, like it was very simple. It was all about like, I would say Axie and CU with breeding, right? Was kind of the most complicated version of that. Yep. And you can think of prime cores as a much simpler system there where you just kind of go, I have a common prime core and every reroll gives me a chance at the higher tiers and better metadata and stats. So I'm going to reroll it a couple of times and see, I hit a rare one that time. I'm probably not going to reroll that one, right? Yeah. And the cool news is that creates a volume in the DEX, which drives LP fee revenue, which a huge chunk of that is used for buyback and burn to keep the economy spinning on that front. So it's a really cool way to tie like a game mechanism to the economy. And that's, again, everything we're doing now is leaning heavily into GameFi and really trying to merge the two.
Yeah, that's cool because obviously re-rolling is something that everyone does in sort of RPGs. So to have that as it is sort of not the key bit of RPGs, but sort of is the key meta, isn't it? Really, that you end up having to build up enormous amounts of resources because you're going to use them all up trying to re-roll these things. I was doing it just today in Immortal Rising 2. In some of their stuff, they do it. Nice. It's amazing how many resources you can use up to get like the highest level thing. You're just like, where did it all go? Didn't get anything. But to have that
adds another dynamic. It definitely adds another dynamic, and you can choose like go to OpenSea and buy a Mythic Prime Core. There will only ever be roughly 77 of those, depending on the RNG. Right? I mean, they're incredibly rare relative to the total collection size of 7,777. Or you choose to reroll, right? And so that's going to be kind of interesting to see that play out. And, Pandora 404 was the first project, which you referenced. They were very gas inefficient and, it wasn't necessarily a great contract, but it did over $1 billion in DEX volume in 75 days, roughly, right? So it kicked off this enormous kind of reroll and trading game with really nothing, no utility or future gameplay tied to it at all. So I am very excited to see how Prime Cores do. And we'll be launching like on-chain heroes and Pandora. Prime Cores will be on ETH mainnet, by the way. So that's going to be kind of an exciting opportunity to, maybe help make Ethereum great again.
Yeah. Cool. So, and I guess, do you think that will... It's the idea, to talk about the economics of it, is having that there, that's sort of, the core way to keep the economy sort of, growing, and you say you're going to have a buy and burn back sort of mechanic as well. So because that's so core to what people will be doing in the games, and they'll be spending to do that, then that's a more intuitive and inherent way of driving an economy rather than, I don't know. I mean, it's basically in a way it's sort of like breeding fees, but breeding fees start to get quite complicated after, I found.
Yeah, it's a much simpler version of that kind of mechanic to start things off. And then I guess talking through the two next events, because it kind of how it all flows together. Prime Core mints in January, and then you're going to have roughly 3 months of this re-roll kind of how do I build the best Prime Core collection. I think most people will not be able to get to 7, right? So there'll be kind of that aspirational chase goal. There probably, I think the average will be 3 or 4 prime cores per player account. Okay. When we launch the Realm Forge, your prime cores now have utility in terms of they activate the Realm Forge. The number of elemental affinities across all of your prime cores scale the bonuses on your resource generators in the Forge. your material production factories. And so the Realm Forge you can think of like kind of a very simple version of Factorio or Offworld Trading Co., if you're familiar with those games. So taking a major lesson learned from Crypto Unicorns and leaning very heavily into passive strategic gameplay instead of a lot of clicks and grind in gameplay, particularly for the Prime cores. And so the Realm Forge you can think of like this strategic economy game where now your synergies, how quickly you're upgrading your resource generators and stuff, directly ties into your Olympus token rewards. So here's the beautiful part of the system. The Prime Core holders, once they activate the Forge, start to receive Olympus tokens based on how many resources they're generating relative to other Prime Core holders. So it creates this very natural drive where the Prime Core holders are receiving tokens. Prime Core trading fees are going to buy back and burn Olympus tokens, which again is, creating a very heavily deflationary mechanism tied to the emission of the Olympus token. And the thing that we've been semi-quiet, unless you've read our website and stuff about, is there are no investor or team unlocks of the token. We actually have no guaranteed tokens as a part of the Olympus token model. So 100%, well, I should say 90%, because 10% is locked in LP permanently. The other 90% of Olympus tokens will only go to the community. And we actually, as a developer, only make tokens if you play the game and spend them in the economy. And we just take a tax on the overall economy. And I think the alignment of incentives there between developer and community is much, much, much stronger. Like we benefit directly through the scale of the economy. And every step of the way when we earn tokens, the community is getting more in what's being burned because that's, better for everyone. And then as the community spends Olympus tokens that they're earning on card gacha, so building out their monster and titan army over time, that's how they're earning tokens for the long-term kind of leaderboard. So it starts with this resource generation kind of game, then shifts over time towards the power of your army, which is you pulling from gacha. To build out your NFT collection, right? And to fuse your monsters and scale their power and all of that kind of stuff. And so I'm very excited to see how this plays out. And I just think that we're starting from a much better foundation based on this kind of like self-regulating mechanism design than Crypto Unicorns certainly had. And I think many projects kind of have. And we'll see. It's quite the flywheel. And I think the alignment of incentives is very clear in this in this new kind of economic model.
I guess that's interesting because basically, as you say there, you guys as the team and the investors are basically only generating revenue sort of indirectly from the economy. So the economy has to be going, and then to a degree, some of it sort of trickles out to you guys. Which is sort of the exact opposite from pretty much every other project, which is basically investors and team get whatever 25% of tokens, and then there's some very complicated vesting thing, and then people start to complain and that you can't vest your tokens, so the team say, "Oh, we're going to not vest our tokens for another year," and it all, which is obviously totally the wrong way around. At some point they have to vest, and then of course, everyone sells them. So this is a. Yeah, it sort of does surprise me in sort of 2025 that still everyone goes to tokenomics, and it is very much like it always has been. There hasn't been a lot of innovation in that. So maybe you'll kickstart something in that as well, which would be good.
I'm hopeful that we do, because I think time-based vesting is just silly because you have no idea whether your product or network has any market fit to begin with, right? And you have no idea what demand is going to be. And that bit us in the ass, to put it bluntly, with Crypto Unicorns many, many times because we were trying to predict new demand and behavior. And, just looking back and going like, how do I build a system where it's just kind of designed to self-regulate? Like in certain cases, there'll be less Olympus token emissions in like really bear market conditions. And you could say, oh my God, well, that's less tokens to fight over. And you're like, well, I would argue that the value of those tokens is better preserved. And I think that's really ultimately the root of this, right? You can only create a sustainable economy if value is preserved over time. So that's a critical component, and you're right to call out that it's simpler. Like, and the alignment of incentives is a lot better. Like, the bigger the economy we grow and the longer we keep it alive, the more money we will make. Kind of like games normally, right? You want to build a great game and you want people to spend money over time in it, and that's what keeps you as the developer alive. And I just think that alignment is much, much better than, in 18 months or 6 months now, like a bunch of tokens are unlocking, and just that mess is not worth it, and I think a path to failure.
Mm-hmm. What do investors think about that? Because obviously it's very different. Investors they feel like they're taking sort of a risk, obviously giving money up front, and these crypto things either sort of basically go to zero or do very well. But sometimes they do very well just over the periods where they can start to vest, and so if they can get their tokens out then and do very well, and then they don't really have to worry about what the project's doing. Whereas you're really sort of back ending, your success. So you're sort of, assuming the game is sort of medium successful or something, you're really pushing what can be sort of extracted quite a long way down that sort of funnel, maybe a couple of years more, than it would otherwise be, even in a fairly what's the word? Even in a fairly sort of well balanced vesting sort of procedure, it seems like if I was an investor, I'd be going, well, I'm not going to get much up front. I'm not going to get something. I might get a lot at the end. If it's super successful, then that's fine. I don't miss out. But it's sort of moving the uncertainty around that.
Honestly, I thought it would be a much bigger fight than it was. Oh. It took me 9 months to convince them to actually give up the IP to the DAO.
That was
right,
hard.
And so that was like pulling teeth and a real pain. I think, especially in today's market, the success of meme coins, this kind of rejection of VC coins, whether it's really happening in the market or not, but the meta around that, and again, the success of meme coins and like why these fair launch things are just getting more traction. I think they're seeing the writing on the wall that like the old meta and like the copy pasta tokenomics from the last few years are not working. And I also think they see me as a little bit of a crazy cowboy, and they're like, we're going to see if this works and, go from there. But the funny thing is, like, they're also investors in us, the business, and the equity behind the business. And so this new model is, again, like game startups forever, is invest in my equity, and it's just about growing book value. And we grow book value by successfully building and scaling this economy that we take this very small tax from in perpetuity, or as long as we're the core developer, is how that would work. Obviously, eventually, we do plan to apply, DAO-based governance again, just not from the beginning. So anyway, it was not a fight. It was actually something that they very quickly signed up for and seem excited about. I think, again, this novel Prime Cores as DN404s, earning a token over time, right, through gameplay, all of that's very novel, and I think they're excited to kind of see how it plays out.
Good, cool. Sort of coming to an end now. One thing is you alluded to earlier on, and it's something I've often said, is when you talk about sort of fully on-chain games, they're a little bit sort of philosophical, and I always sort of joke that the fully on-chain game community, fully on-chain games always get 1,000 players, and it's the 1,000 people who are making fully on-chain games. So we haven't gone too detailed into sort of the game, but we've sort of painted a picture of some of the sort of core, maybe economic mechanics, but some of the mechanics. To me, it sounds interesting, but no one should base their game on my on what I like to play. It's a fully on-chain game. It's got some, I guess, fairly sort of, to my mind, fairly sort of core, as in hardcore sort of mechanics and I can sort of see how strategies would work in that. That sort of seems exciting to me. But can you get a mass market into this? Do you need a mass market into this? How does because obviously crypto unicorns was very. It was unicorns. It was pretty, and to some degree, everyone could sort of understand and sort of see it was an attractive sort of theme. Whereas this is, in a sense, a more of a sort of game, sort of darker sort of theme, mechs maybe, without being too stereotypical, doesn't appeal to women in the same way. Obviously, you don't know because the project's not live. But how does it fit within your sort of segmentation of audience, which you know a lot about from your mobile days?
Big time. I mean, this is the magic question, right? And the thing that'll determine success or failure. I would argue with crypto unicorns being broad for everyone is a terrible way to try to design and build games. So with Neo Olympus, we are very, very focused on crypto natives and trying to build a game for crypto natives. And that's why like the economic inception phase, this like series of gamified mint events is designed for people who are, you know, NFT veterans, right? From 21 and 22 that are still here, right? The DeFi summer vets, right? The people who, you know, God forbid, if you're still in the pumped up fun trenches, right? Like come out of the trenches and, you know, and play something that's more strategic and less likely to, you know, expose you to a rug or some other terrible memes and things that are kind of happening in those trenches. That early phase of gameplay is very focused on crypto natives. And I want to build an experience for people like myself that see Ethereum as the world computer and want to play games on it. And those games have asset financialization at their core. The gameplay activation phase, which comes after the series of gamified mint events, that is a chance for a kind of grinder player set to show up. And I'm very excited about this kind of map-based gameplay because we're leaning very heavily into tactical RPGs. It's really like Fire Emblem with mechs, monsters, and titans. That is the game loop that we're ultimately going to socket into this economy. And the cool thing about it is it just gives this ramp, you know, with the launch of the Hero Forge, players, this new cohort of players can show up and start to play the game. And they haven't had to have been here during the economic phase because that was for the Prime Core holders. And so you get this kind of like Pixels. You have the landowners and you have the grinders who are coming in. Like I'm not sure they've done the best job at marrying the two of those things. Like everyone, they're kind of struggling with distribution and the economics of managing their economy. But we're trying to land that. I told you kind of during the preface, like, how do you make shipping a game not bearish? That's the real focus of this. And it comes down to Prime Core holders, you know, have the Realm Forge. The Realm Forge produces monsters and titans. Eventually it produces realm shards, which are the map pieces. You put your titans and monsters on the map and protect your piece, and the hero grinders show up and try to get resources off that map in this tactical RPG game loop style. And I think that's a really good marriage of game loop to economy in a way that through this cyclical gameplay is going to let us create this fun, repeatable kind of sandbox environment. And unlike crypto unicorns, this is the game loop. There's not jousting and potentially racing and, you know, tribes and all this other stuff and the ecosystem of second party. It's like, nope. This is the focus. We're building the gameplay on mud in close partnership with the Lattice team. We're extremely pumped about their game engine and especially some of the new stuff that they've announced and even haven't announced that they're bringing to it. So couldn't have better partners on that front. My co-founder is leading game design this time around. He has played more tactical RPGs, JRPGs than anyone else in the world. I would put him up to the challenge of building a really, really fun game loop. And it comes with this benefit where it injects new life because players starting the Hero Forge are going to be able to start. There's a free to try on ramp via soulbound tokens. So you can get your first couple of gotcha pulls for free and check it out. Because that's the thing, building for crypto natives doesn't mean the experience has to be terrible. With account abstraction, with this cross-chain interop solution we talked about earlier, the infra is there for people to build fun and compelling experiences that do not require you to even set up a wallet to try. So don't get me wrong, just because we're focused on the crypto native niche doesn't mean that, you know, people can't come in and play the game. The opportunities to go mobile are there this time around and much clearer. And so anyway, I'm like leaking too much alpha. Have to have me on, you know, in another 4 or 5 months, and we'll have more to kind of talk about around that. Hopefully some early traction to really be excited about. But I'm really pumped about the future. I think the opportunity to take everything that we learned with crypto unicorns and apply it, particularly with where the market is right now, is very exciting. And so we're up for the challenge. We've certainly got our bruises and bumps and black eyes, quite frankly, from crypto unicorns. But again, it's about getting back up and trying again. So, John, I appreciate you having me on and kind of letting me, this is really the first moment I've gotten out and talked about Neo Olympus. So, kind of fun to circle back.
Good. No, absolutely. I'm always happy to have people back again. And just to clarify, so you haven't got a date yet, but January is going to be your first sort of mint event, and then things are going to sort of build up through several months, really. For those
correct. Yes, okay. Correct. You can think about like an event every 3 months or so as the cadence going forward on that front. Okay. And the cool thing is, again, the first mint is the only mint that we're like selling things. At that point, you know, it is very much value being distributed to players, right, based on their success and strategy and skill inside of that game loop. And so I'm very, very, very pumped, particularly for like the Realm Forge launch. The Prime Cores are going to be fun. It'll be fun to re-roll and build your strategy. But once the Realm Forge launches like that, and for gamers like me that like Forex strategy, that like economy sim kind of games, like that's going to be your it'll be a lot of fun for people that enjoy those game loops. Good. Well, thank you so much for coming on and talking with such enthusiasm as ever about the game. Looking forward to it as well. Thanks, Aron. Thanks for having me, John. Not a problem. And thanks to you guys for watching, listening. Remember, every episode we are talking to the people who are building out this new way of playing games and owning games and all this other stuff. I think it's going to be, well, I think we all hope it's going to be a very, even more exciting year than we otherwise thought in 2025. So don't miss out, do subscribe, and we'll see you on the next episode.